The tears streaking down Abigail Zimmerman's face glistened in the harsh New Mexico sunlight as she stood helplessly at the Stagecoach steps, watching the driver load the last of the passengers' luggage. Santa Fe, 1875, a place and time that had promised her escape, but was now threatening to become just another dead end in her tumultuous life. "I'm sorry, miss," the Stagecoach driver said, not sounding sorry at all. "No ticket, no ride, those are the rules." Abigail clutched her small carpet bag tighter to her chest. The letter from her aunt in Colorado Springs had arrived just days after the bank foreclosed on her family home, following her father's funeral. With her last coins spent on a proper burial, she had nothing left for the fare. "Please, sir," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I have family waiting, I have nowhere else to go." The driver shook his head, climbing up to his perch. "Rules are rules, miss." That's when she felt a presence behind her. Tall and solid as an oak tree, casting a shadow that enveloped her completely. "How much for the lady's fare?" The voice was deep, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas origins. Abigail turned to face a man unlike any she'd encountered in her 22 years. Broad-shouldered and sun-bronzed, he wore a worn leather vest over a faded blue shirt. A dusty Stetson shaded piercing green eyes that assessed her situation with a quick glance. $4 to Colorado Springs, the driver called down. Without hesitation, the stranger reached into his pocket and produced the money, handing it to the driver. "The lady will be riding with me." Abigail wiped her tears with trembling fingers. "Sir, I cannot accept Zane Briscoe," he interrupted, tipping his hat. "And I reckon you can't stay here either, miss." Abigail Zimmerman," she replied, noticing the silver spurs on his boots catching the sunlight as he shifted his weight. "Well, Miss Zimmerman, that coach is about to leave. What's it going to be?" With one last uncertain look at the stranger who'd appeared like a mirage in her moment of desperation, Abigail allowed him to help her up the Stagecoach steps. His hand was calloused but gentle, his grip firm and reassuring. Inside the coach, they settled across from each other. Besides them, there was only an elderly couple and a businessman with a briefcase clutched protectively on his lap. As the Stagecoach lurched forward, kicking up dust, Abigail studied her benefactor. There was a small scar cutting through his right eyebrow, and his jawline was shadowed with stubble. A gun belt hung low on his hips, the mark of a man accustomed to trouble. "Thank you, Mr. Briscoe," she said, finding her voice at last. "I promise to repay you when I reach my aunt's home." Zane shook his head. "No need for that. Where I come from, you don't leave a lady stranded." "And where is that, if I may ask?" "All over," he answered cryptically. "Most recently San Antonio, but that's a story for a longer ride." His smile was slight but genuine, transforming his weathered face. The coach hit a rut, jostling the passengers. Instinctively, Zane's hand shot out to steady Abigail, withdrawing quickly when she was secure. "What takes you to Colorado Springs?" he asked, changing the subject. Abigail hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to this stranger, but there was something in his direct gaze that invited honesty. "My father passed 2 weeks ago. The bank took our home in Santa Fe. My aunt is my only remaining family." She straightened her shoulders, determined not to shed more tears. "And you, business or pleasure in Colorado?" Zane's expression darkened momentarily. "Business of sorts, looking for someone." The businessman across from them cleared his throat disapprovingly at their conversation, but Zane paid him no mind. As the Stagecoach continued its journey north, the terrain grew more rugged. Abigail found herself staring out the window at the red rocks and scrub brush, her mind wandering to the uncertain future awaiting her. She'd left behind everything familiar: her father's medical practice where she had worked as his assistant, their small but comfortable home, the friends who had already begun to treat her differently once poverty touched her. "You have medical training," Zane observed, catching her off guard. "How did you know?" He nodded toward her hands. "The way you fold them, precise, and there's faint iodine staining on your right index finger." Abigail instinctively covered her hands. "Yes, I assisted my father for 6 years. He was teaching me everything he knew." Her voice caught. "He believed women should be allowed to practice medicine properly." "Progressive man," Zane commented, "too progressive for Santa Fe society. It's partly why we struggled. Many wouldn't come to a doctor who let his daughter do more than clean instruments." She gave a bitter smile. And now here I am, with all that knowledge and nowhere to use it. The stagecoach stopped at a way station as the afternoon stretched on. While the horses were changed, the passengers disembarked for a quick meal of beans and cornbread. Standing in line for food, Abigail noticed how other travelers gave Zane a wide berth. He carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who knew how to handle trouble, but there was something else, a wariness in his eyes as he surveyed the room, always keeping his back to the wall. "You're not just any cowboy, are you, Mr. Briscoe?" she asked when they sat at a rough-hewn table together, his fork paused midway to his mouth. "What makes you say that? The way people look at you, or don't look at you." Zane set down his fork. "I was a Texas Ranger. Now I track people for money. Some call it bounty hunting, but I prefer to think of it as helping justice along." Abigail's eyes widened. "And who are you tracking to Colorado Springs?" "A man who robbed a bank in Albuquerque, shot 2 people, 1 didn't make it." His jaw tightened. "He's holed up with family near Pikes Peak, thinks he's safe." "Is that why you're helping me, to blend in?" "A bounty hunter traveling with a lady draws less attention." Zane looked genuinely surprised. "No, Miss Zimmerman, I helped you because you needed helping. Simple as that." The return call for the coach interrupted their conversation. As they settled back into their seats, Abigail found herself studying Zane more carefully. There was a kindness beneath his rugged exterior that she hadn't expected. The journey continued through the afternoon and into early evening. The businessman and elderly couple dozed, but sleep eluded Abigail. Every jolt of the coach reminded her she was moving further from everything she knew toward a relative she barely remembered. "You should rest," Zane said quietly. "Still a long way to Colorado Springs." "I can't seem to quiet my mind," she admitted. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a book, offering it to her. "Might help pass the time." Surprised, Abigail accepted the volume, Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. The leather cover was worn, the pages dog-eared from frequent reading. "A bounty hunter who reads poetry," she mused, a genuine smile touching her lips for the first time that day. "Man can't live on tracking alone," he replied with a hint of self-deprecation. As she opened the book, a pressed wildflower fell out, a delicate blue columbine, Colorado's state flower. Abigail carefully returned it to its place. "A keepsake?" she asked. Zane nodded. "Reminder of simpler times." They lapsed into comfortable silence as Abigail began to read. Outside, the landscape slowly changed as they moved north, the red rocks giving way to more varied terrain. The first stars appeared in the darkening sky. When the stagecoach stopped for the night at a remote inn, Zane helped Abigail down, his hands firm at her waist. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her. The innkeeper, a stout woman named Mrs. Hale, showed them to the dining room where a simple supper awaited. Afterward, she led Abigail to a small but clean room. "Your husband's across the hall," Mrs. Hale said matter-of-factly. "Oh, Mr. Briscoe isn't," Abigail began, but the woman had already bustled away. Alone in her room, Abigail unpacked her nightgown and the few possessions she'd managed to salvage. Among them was her father's pocket watch and a small medical kit, his parting gift before the fever took him. The memory of his final days brought fresh tears, which she quickly wiped away. A soft knock at her door startled her. Zane stood in the hallway, hat in hand. "Just wanted to make sure you're settled," he said, "and to tell you we leave at first light. Thank you for everything today." He nodded, then hesitated. "Your aunt in Colorado Springs, she expecting you? I sent a letter, but I'm not sure it arrived before I left. It's been years since I've seen her." Abigail bit her lip. "Truthfully, I don't know if she'll welcome me." "Family's family," Zane said, but there was something in his tone that suggested he knew different could be true. "And if she doesn't, I have $7 to my name." Zane considered this. "Colorado Springs is growing fast. A woman with medical knowledge could find work. Not as a doctor, perhaps, but—" He trailed off, noticing her expression. "I've upset you." "No," Abigail said quickly. "You're right, I need to be practical." After bidding her good night, Zane returned to his room. Abigail lay awake for hours, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the inn, wondering what the future held. Morning came too soon. Over a breakfast of flapjacks and strong coffee, Abigail noticed Zane studying a worn wanted poster. The face on it was young, barely more than a boy. "Is that him?" "The bank robber?" she asked quietly. Zane folded the paper. "Samuel Wilkes, 19 years old and already killed a man. So young to throw his life away, Abigail murmured. Some start down the wrong path early. Zane's eyes clouded with something like regret. Hard to turn back once you've gone too far. The stagecoach journey resumed, the terrain growing more mountainous as they progressed northward. The air turned cooler, and Abigail was grateful for the woolen shawl she'd packed. Around midday, the coach suddenly slowed. Zane tensed, his hand moving instinctively to his holster. "What is it?" Abigail whispered. "Tree across the road," he said, peering out the window. "Could be nothing, could be trouble." The driver called down that they needed to clear the way. Zane exchanged a look with the businessman, who had gone pale. "Stay inside," Zane told Abigail firmly. She watched through the window as he descended, scanning the surrounding trees. The driver and another male passenger began trying to move the fallen pine. That's when three masked men emerged from the brush, guns drawn. "Nobody move," one shouted. "This is a robbery," Abigail's heart hammered in her chest. The elderly couple clutched each other while the businessman clutched his case tighter. Outside, Zane had positioned himself behind the coach wheel, his gun drawn but not yet visible to the robbers. "Hands up," the lead robber ordered the driver and passenger, who complied immediately. Zane caught Abigail's eye through the window and mouthed what looked like, "Get down." She slid to the floor of the coach, pulling the elderly couple with her. The businessman remained frozen in his seat. A shot rang out, followed by shouts. Abigail flinched but resisted the urge to look outside. More gunfire followed, 3 shots in rapid succession. Then silence. "Is everyone all right in there?" Zane's voice called moments later. Abigail cautiously raised her head. Through the window, she could see 2 of the robbers on the ground. The third was nowhere in sight. The driver opened the coach door. "All clear, folks, thanks to this gentleman here." Shakily, Abigail descended the steps. Zane stood nearby, reloading his revolver. There was a graze on his left arm, blood seeping through his sleeve. "You're hurt," she said, medical instincts taking over. "It's nothing," he dismissed, but winced when she touched his arm. "Let me see." "I have supplies in my bag." While the driver and the other male passenger moved the tree, Abigail led Zane to a boulder by the roadside. She opened her medical kit and efficiently cleaned and bandaged the wound. "Good thing I had a doctor's daughter with me," he said, watching her work with obvious admiration. "Where's the third robber?" she asked, tying off the bandage. "Ran off. Not the first time a gang's tried this stretch of road." Zane flexed his arm, testing her handiwork. "You've done this before." "Many times. Gunshot wounds were common in Santa Fe." She packed away her supplies. "What about them?" She nodded toward the 2 men on the ground. "One's dead, the other's just winged. Driver's tying him up for the authorities in the next town." Abigail studied Zane's face, searching for signs of remorse or regret at taking a life. His expression remained impassive, but something in his eyes had changed, a haunted quality that hadn't been there before. "Does it get easier?" she asked softly. "Killing." "If it does, that's when you should stop," he answered. The journey resumed an hour later, the mood in the coach subdued. The businessman kept shooting nervous glances at Zane while the elderly couple whispered among themselves. Abigail found herself sitting closer to Zane than before, drawing comfort from his solid presence. As afternoon faded into evening, the stagecoach arrived at another way station. This one was larger, with a proper dining room and separate cabins for travelers. Over a dinner of venison stew, Zane and Abigail sat apart from the others, who seemed unsure how to act around the man who had both saved them and killed in front of them. "Thank you," Abigail said. "For protecting us today." Zane nodded, his focus on his plate. "Just doing what needed doing." "Is that why you became a ranger? To protect people?" He considered her question as if no one had ever asked him that before. "Partly, and partly because I was good with a gun and needed direction. And now, is bounty hunting just for the money?" "Started that way." He met her gaze. "But I only take jobs for men who deserve catching, the kind law can't or won't reach otherwise. Like Samuel Wilkes." "Like Wilkes," he confirmed. "Though sometimes I wonder if I'm any better than those I hunt, just another gun for hire." "You're nothing like them," Abigail said with surprising vehemence. "You could have left us all to those robbers today." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Strong opinions for someone who's known me all of one day, Miss Zimmerman." "I'm a good judge of character," she replied. My father taught me to observe people carefully. It's essential in medicine to see what patients don't tell you. And what do you see when you look at me? The question was asked lightly, but his eyes held genuine curiosity. Abigail studied him openly now. A man who's lived by a code. Who's seen too much darkness but hasn't let it consume him. Who reads poetry and helps crying women at Stagecoach steps. For a moment, Zane seemed at a loss for words. Then he chuckled softly. You make me sound downright respectable. Perhaps you are, Mr. Briscoe. More than you give yourself credit for. That night, Abigail found sleep equally elusive. The events of the day replayed in her mind: the robbery, the gunshots, the way Zane had put himself in danger to protect strangers. It confused her, this mix of gentleness and deadly skill in one man. Dawn broke with heavy clouds threatening rain. Abigail joined Zane for breakfast, noting he seemed more reserved than the day before. Something wrong? She asked as they waited for the Stagecoach to be readied, just thinking about what awaits in Colorado Springs. He studied her face. One more day of travel. You ready to face your aunt? As ready as I'll ever be, Abigail replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. The skies opened just as they boarded the coach. Rain drummed on the roof as they continued northward, making conversation difficult. The elderly couple had decided to stay behind at the way station until the weather cleared, leaving just Abigail, Zane, and the businessman. Hours into the journey, the Stagecoach lurched violently, then listed to one side. Broken wheel, the driver shouted through the rain. They were stranded on a muddy mountain road, miles from the nearest town. The driver informed them repairs would take hours, and with the rain, progress would be slow. There's a trapper's cabin about a half-mile up, he told them. You folks might be more comfortable waiting there. The businessman opted to stay with the coach and his precious cargo, but Zane suggested Abigail would be better off out of the rain. Wrapped in his coat, which he insisted she take, they trudged through the mud to the abandoned cabin. The structure was simple but sound: a single room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn table, and narrow bed. Zane immediately set about building a fire while Abigail wrung out her soaked skirts. You should change into something dry, he said, keeping his back to her as the fire caught. I'll step outside and get even more soaked. Don't be foolish. Abigail retrieved her spare dress from her carpet bag. Just turn around. She changed quickly, grateful for the warmth of the growing fire. Zane's coat had kept her relatively dry, but her shoes and stockings were soaked through. Your turn, she said when she was decent again. You need to get out of those wet clothes. Zane hesitated, then nodded. He removed his vest and shirt, keeping his back to her, but not before Abigail glimpsed a web of scars across his torso. Those look like they needed stitching, she commented, professional interest overcoming propriety. Zane pulled a dry shirt from his saddlebag. Apache raid 6 years ago, field medic did what he could. May I? Abigail approached, her medical curiosity piqued. After a moment's consideration, Zane turned, allowing her to examine the scars that crisscrossed his chest and abdomen. Arrow wounds, she observed, her fingers lightly tracing a particularly jagged scar near his collarbone. This one was close to your heart. Too close, he agreed, his voice lower than usual. Abigail became acutely aware of their proximity, of the warmth radiating from his skin, of his breath stirring her hair. She stepped back quickly, flustered. You should finish changing, she said, turning toward the fire. They sat in companionable silence as the rain continued to fall. Zane produced a deck of cards, and they played several hands of poker to pass the time. I should warn you, Abigail said as she arranged her cards. My father taught me well. I can see that, Zane replied ruefully as she won for the third time. The hours stretched on with no sign of the Stagecoach driver. As evening approached, Zane ventured outside to gather more firewood, returning drenched but with enough to last the night. I think we'll be spending the night here, he said, shaking water from his hat. Roads turning to a river out there. Abigail nodded, trying to hide her nervousness at the situation. Alone in a cabin with a man she'd known for just 2 days, it was hardly proper. Yet she trusted Zane in a way she couldn't quite explain. They shared the provisions from Zane's saddlebag jerky hardtack and a flask of whiskey that burned Abigail's throat but warmed her insides. Tell me about your father, Zane said as they sat before the fire. He sounds like an unusual man. Abigail smiled at the memory. Came west after the war. He was a surgeon for the Union. My mother died when I was 10, and after that he raised me on his own, taught me everything he knew about medicine because he said I had the touch for it. The touch, knowing how to ease pain. How to make people feel safe even when they're afraid. She stared into the flames. He wanted me to go east to one of those new women's medical colleges, but there was never enough money. And now that dream is gone, she said simply, but I still have his knowledge. That's something no one can take from me. Zane studied her with newfound respect. You could still go east. Colorado Springs is growing fast. Opportunity there for someone with your skills. Perhaps. Abigail hesitated. What about you? After you find Samuel Wilkes, what then? Another bounty. Another town, he shrugged. It's what I know. Is it what you want? The question hung between them. Zane added another log to the fire, sparks spiraling upward. Never really thought about wanting something different, he finally said. Been on my own since I was 16. Rangers gave me purpose for a while, then when politics got in the way of justice once too often, I left. Been hunting bounties ever since. No family, none living. Abigail's heart ached for the loneliness she sensed beneath his matter-of-fact tone. It sounds solitary. It suits me. But his eyes told a different story. As the night deepened, the question of sleeping arrangements loomed. There was only the one narrow bed, barely wide enough for one person. You take it, Zane said firmly. I'll be fine by the fire. Abigail wanted to protest, but knew it was the only proper solution. She settled onto the hard mattress, pulling her shawl around her for additional warmth. From her position, she could see Zane's profile as he sat by the fire, his expression pensive. The flickering light cast shadows across his features, softening the hardness that his life had etched there. Zane, she said softly, the first time she'd used his given name. Thank you, not just for today, but for everything since Santa Fe. He turned, his eyes meeting hers across the dimly lit cabin. Try to sleep, Abigail. Tomorrow will be a long day. Dawn broke clear and bright, the storm having passed in the night. Abigail woke to find Zane already up, stoking the fire and brewing coffee in a small pot. Driver came by at first light, he told her. Coach is repaired. We leave in an hour. They reached Colorado Springs by mid-afternoon. The town was larger than Abigail had expected, with proper streets and substantial buildings alongside the expected saloons and general stores. Your aunt's address? Zane asked as they collected their bags from the stagecoach. Abigail handed him the letter she'd carried all this way. He studied it, then pointed eastward. About 10 blocks that way, near the new hospital, ironically enough. They walked together through the busy streets, Abigail growing more nervous with each step. What if her aunt wasn't home? What if she refused to take her in? As if sensing her anxiety, Zane placed a reassuring hand on her arm. It'll be all right. They found the house a tidy 2-story with a small garden out front. Abigail hesitated at the gate. Would you come with me? Just to the door, Zane nodded, following her up the path. Before they could knock, the door swung open, revealing a woman in her 50s with Abigail's same blue eyes. Abigail, the woman exclaimed. My goodness, you're the image of your mother, Aunt Martha, Abigail managed, relief washing over her. Martha Zimmerman embraced her niece warmly, then noticed Zane standing a respectful distance behind. And who might this gentleman be? This is Mr. Briscoe, Abigail said. He's been kind enough to escort me here. Martha's eyes narrowed slightly as she took in Zane's weathered appearance and gun belt. Well, Mr. Briscoe, it seems I owe you my gratitude. Please, won't you both come inside? Over tea, Abigail explained the circumstances that had brought her to Colorado Springs, carefully editing the more dangerous parts of the journey. Martha listened sympathetically, occasionally glancing at Zane with undisguised curiosity. You'll stay with me, of course, she told Abigail firmly. And as it happens, I have connections at the new hospital. A woman with your training would be valuable, even if not as a doctor officially. Abigail's heart lifted at the prospect. Truly, absolutely, we're not quite as provincial here as in Santa Fe. Martha smiled. Now, Mr. Briscoe, will you be staying in town long? Zane set down his teacup. Just until I conclude my business. He's tracking a fugitive, Abigail explained, earning a sharp look from Zane. A bounty hunter, Martha said, her tone cooling noticeably. Former Texas Ranger, Abigail corrected, feeling strangely defensive of him. An awkward silence fell over the room. Zane stood, reaching for his hat. I should be going. Need to check in with the local sheriff about Wilkes. Martha showed him to the door while Abigail lingered in the parlor, suddenly uncertain. The prospect of saying goodbye to Zane filled her with an unexpected sadness. He paused on the threshold. Miss Zimmerman seems settled now, he said to Martha. Thank you for taking her in. She's family, Martha replied simply. Abigail hurried to the door. Will I see you again before you leave town? Zane hesitated, glancing at Martha, who was making no effort to hide her disapproval. Better not, he said quietly. You have a fresh start here, best not to complicate it. With that, he tipped his hat and walked away, his tall figure soon disappearing around the corner. The next few days passed in a blur as Abigail settled into her aunt's home and met with the hospital administrator. True to Martha's word, they were eager to employ someone with Abigail's experience, offering her a position as a nurse with special duties assisting the surgeons. Yet despite this good fortune, Abigail found her thoughts constantly returning to Zane. Had he found Samuel Wilkes? Had he already left town? The questions nagged at her, but pride kept her from asking around. A week after her arrival, she was walking home from the hospital when she spotted a familiar figure outside the sheriff's office. Zane was mounting a horse, saddlebags packed for travel. Without thinking, Abigail called out to him. He turned, surprise evident on his face as she hurried across the street. You're leaving, she said, slightly breathless. Job's done. Wilkes is in custody. He didn't quite meet her eyes. Heard you got a position at the hospital. Congratulations. Yes, I start officially next week. Abigail hesitated. I wanted to thank you again for everything. Zane shifted in his saddle. No need, you'd have found your way, perhaps, but I'm glad it was with you. She gathered her courage. Where will you go now? Heard about a job in Durango. Man killed his wife, fled justice. Another town, another bounty, she said softly. It's what I do. Abigail looked up at him, suddenly understanding the emotion that had been growing inside her since that first day at the Stagecoach. It doesn't have to be all you do. Zane's expression softened. Abigail, the hospital needs security, she blurted out. With all the new construction and valuable medicines, I mentioned you to the administrator. He looked genuinely taken aback. Me, working at a hospital, you said yourself you only hunt men who deserve it. There are other ways to bring justice. She reached up to touch his hand on the reins. Ways that don't require constantly moving on. Your aunt wouldn't approve. I'm 22 years old. I don't need my aunt's approval for the company I keep. For a long moment, Zane sat motionless on his horse, conflict evident in his eyes. Then slowly he dismounted to stand before her. I'm not the settling kind, he said, but there was a question in his voice now. Maybe you just never had reason to try, Abigail countered. Around them, the citizens of Colorado Springs went about their business, paying little attention to the woman in the simple blue dress and the bounty hunter with the uncertain future. One job, Zane finally said. In Durango, to fulfill my commitment, then I'll come back. Talk to your administrator. Abigail's heart soared. You mean it? Instead of answering, Zane did something that scandalized several passing ladies. He leaned down and kissed Abigail right there on the main street of Colorado Springs. When they broke apart, both slightly flustered, he grinned. Something to remember me by. As if I could forget the man who paid my fare and said, ride with me, she replied, matching his smile. 3 weeks later, Abigail was organizing supplies in the hospital dispensary when a commotion at the front entrance caught her attention. She emerged to find Zane speaking with the administrator, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically formal in a clean shirt and newly trimmed hair. Their eyes met across the lobby, and the connection that had begun on a dusty Stagecoach in Santa Fe strengthened into something unbreakable. That evening, walking along the newly laid pathways of Colorado Springs Central Park, Zane told her about Durango, how he'd delivered the murderer to justice, but had felt hollow afterward rather than satisfied. I realized something, he said, taking her hand as they strolled beneath the cottonwoods. All these years I've been chasing other people's wrongs, trying to make them right, never stopped to build something right of my own. And now, Abigail asked, her heart quickening. Now I aim to try, he said simply, if you'll help me. 6 months later, they were married in the small chapel near the hospital. Martha Zimmerman, won over by Zane's steadfast character and devotion to her niece, sat in the front pew dabbing at her eyes. As head of hospital security, Zane had discovered a talent for organization and leadership that had lain dormant during his years of solitary bounty hunting. And with Abigail's growing reputation as the most skilled nurse in Colorado Springs, they made a formidable team both professionally and personally. In the years that followed, Abigail would sometimes think back to that moment at the Stagecoach steps, her tears, his unexpected kindness, the journey that had changed both their lives. "What made you stop that day?" she asked him once as they sat on the porch of their own home, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Zane considered the question, his arm around her shoulders. "Honestly, it was your eyes. Even filled with tears, they had such determination. Like you weren't asking the world for help, just daring it to try and stop you." Abigail laughed, leaning into his embrace. "And here I thought it was my helpless feminine appeal. Nothing helpless about you, Abigail Briscoe, never has been." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Thank God I recognized that, even if it took me longer to recognize love." The mountain air grew cooler as the sun disappeared completely, but neither moved to go inside. Some moments were worth savoring, especially for two people who had found each other against all odds in the wild, unpredictable West.